Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a defender's absolute worst nightmare, pass the hash and pass the ticket. These are, without a doubt, two of the most devastating lateral movement techniques in all of Active Directory penetration testing. If you've been following along with us, you know we've been building up to this moment. Today, we aren't just looking at high-level concepts. We're breaking down the exact nitty-gritty protocol mechanics that make these attacks possible in the first place. Picture this. A massive corporate network heist. An attacker manages to compromise a single machine. But here's the catch. They don't have a plain text password for the administrator. They have absolutely no way to crack the cryptographic hash they've managed to capture. And yet, they breach the entire system anyway. How is that even possible? Well, it's because, in Windows, the hash literally is the password, and the ticket is the identity. You see, you don't actually need to know what the key looks like to open the door. You just need to hold it. Let's unpack this a bit, because the reality of protocol-level authentication just totally shatters a huge cybersecurity myth. We so often think that a 20-character password with maximum complexity, symbols, numbers, uppercase letters, the whole shebang, keeps us completely safe. But human input is totally irrelevant in protocol-level authentication. In Windows NTLM authentication, the server never ever sees the plain text password. The hash itself is the cryptographic secret. Once an attacker captures that hash, your password complexity is nothing more than an illusion. So, to really grasp how this exploit functions under the hood, we're going to unpack the three-step NTLM Challenge-Response protocol. All right, here's how a totally normal, legitimate authentication kicks off. In step 1, the legitimate client sends an authentication request to the server, basically saying, "Hey, I'm target user." Then in step 2, the server responds. But it doesn't just say, "Okay, prove it." It actually sends back a challenge block. This is a 16-byte, cryptographically random number. Think of it like a completely unpredictable one-time puzzle that the client absolutely has to solve to prove they are who they say they are. Now, the really fascinating part happens in step 3. How exactly does the client solve that puzzle? Well, they take that 16-byte challenge and they encrypt it using their NT hash. They then send that encrypted response right back to the server. Now, because the server also holds that exact same NT hash in its own database, it runs the exact same mathematical calculation. If the server's result perfectly matches the client's result, boom, access granted. Okay, pause for a second. Let's just let this aha moment really sink in. When you think about the attacker's position, you see this incredible vulnerability of substitution. This right here is pass the hash. The attacker simply substitutes themselves for the legitimate client. They send the username, they receive that random challenge, and they encrypt it using a hash they stole from memory. The server does its check, the math perfectly aligns, and again, access granted. The server literally cannot tell who actually holds the hash. And since the attacker never needed to reverse the hash back into a plain text password, there's zero crocking required. This isn't a bug in NTLM, folks. It's exactly how it was designed to work. But hold on, before you go off trying to pass literally every hash you stumble across, we need to clear up a super common beginner misconception. Not all hashes are created equal. You have to know exactly what you're looking at. The LM hash is an incredibly old, weak legacy format that is completely broken and honestly pretty irrelevant today. The NT hash, however, is the modern Windows standard. That right there is your golden ticket for a pass the hash attack. So, the crucial takeaway here is understanding the difference between an NT hash and an NTLM hash. If you pull an NT hash straight from memory or a database, you can pass it directly as the key, right then and there. But if you capture a Net-NTLM v1 or v2 hash over the network, say using local spoofing techniques like LLM&R, you can't pass it directly. A network challenge response hash has to be cracked offline first to reveal the underlying NT hash before you can actually use it for lateral movement. Okay, let's kick things up a notch. Building off those foundational NTLM protocols brings us to an even more powerful technique, pass the ticket. While pass the hash proves you possess a key, pass the ticket operates at the Kerberos level. You aren't even proving who you are anymore. You're simply injecting a stolen digital ID badge directly into your session. By injecting a stolen ticket, granting ticket, or service ticket, you bypass that initial cryptographic challenge entirely and immediately assume the victim's identity. And honestly, it gets worse for defenders. Attackers don't just sit around waiting to steal active tickets. They can literally forge their own. These are the special variants of pass the ticket. If an attacker compromises the master domain account hash, that's the KERP-TGT account, they can forge a golden ticket. This creates a fake ticket-granting ticket that gives them persistent complete domain dominance.
Or they can use a specific service account hash to forge a silver ticket, which grants them highly targeted access to specific resources without ever even talking to the domain controller. To actually pull off these lateral movements in the real world, you've got to know your hunting grounds. Where do these secrets live? Well, you've got LSSS memory on local machines, which holds active session NTLM hashes and Kerberos tickets. You have the local SAM database storing local account hashes. You have the ultimate prize, the ntds.dit database on the domain controllers, containing hashes for every single domain account. And, of course, the network wire itself, where those Net-NTLM v2 responses are constantly traversing.
Now, extracting all these secrets requires some very specific tooling. To dump credentials straight from active LSS memory, attackers are relying on tools like Mimikatz or the Kiwi extension. To pillage the local SAM database, they'll fire up Secret Stump with administrative privileges. And to pull from that central ntds.dit Active Directory database, they'll run a DC sync attack to replicate the credentials right over the network. This exact toolkit is precisely why security operations centers are constantly obsessively monitoring for these extraction behaviors. At the end of the day, the hash and the ticket truly are the keys to the kingdom. Protocol mastery is literally the foundation of exploitation. Once you understand that the hash replaces the plaintext password entirely, bypassing all those human-created complexity rules, and that the ticket bypasses the initial authentication flow entirely to grant an immediate assumed identity, you understand exactly why these techniques have dominated corporate network breaches for decades. So we've broken down the protocols. You now know exactly why the server accepts the hash, and you know how the ticket grants the identity. The theoretical foundation is officially set. But, as we all know, simply possessing the keys is only half the battle. The real question is, are you ready to use them? In Part 2, we're going to take everything we just learned and perform these attacks live in our lab environment. I will see you there.